Paul, here is your tape, and I do have a micro cassette. I'm at my school, so I will do this while I stretch in preparation for a class, making this an even more visceral martial arts interview. How did Bruce Lee inspire me as a martial artist? I started martial arts at the age of 13 and had been studying Taekwondo for about 6 or 8 months before the Bruce Lee craze hit. So initially I had no idea. I didn't start it as a result of that fad, but was immediately attracted to the way Bruce moved. And then after reading all the biographies and books and everything, I was just totally fascinated with him. I mean, he was the legend, and there was, universal synergy. He became as famous as Jesus Christ, the Beatles, and Elvis. I mean, it was unbelievable. But there was something very special about the things he said and things he believed in that really connected with me. And I'm sure everyone says the same thing. They had a special place in their heart for Bruce, and he spoke directly to them, and that was just testimony to the power the man had. After getting into him a little bit, I realized that as a youngster, at the age of 6, I used to sneak down and watch the Green Hornet and watch Kato, and it was pretty amazing because I never realized that as a memory until I discovered, in one of the special reports that Bruce Lee was Kato in the Green Hornet. And then it kind of triggered these early childhood memories because I was only 6 in 1966. So I remember I used to, sneak out of bed at night, go down to the den because the Green Hornet was where it was playing in Canada. It was on like at 7 o'clock, and I was already in bed or something like that. But that was pretty fascinating. Question 2: how did you first meet Brandon? I had always wanted to meet Brandon and always thought that we would be close friends, which we turned out to be. And it was kind of one of those destiny type things in that I had an interest in acting and went to LA on one of my trips to do an interview with Inside Kung Fu magazine, and decided to audit an acting class given by Eric Morris. And I called Morris up. I had seen his book, one of his books he'd written in Montreal at a bookstore, and called him up to ask him if I could come audit. And he asked me a little bit about myself. I told him I was a martial artist. And he said, "Oh, it's so funny, he had just finished working with Chuck Norris, and he'd worked with another athlete for an action picture, and he had Brandon Lee in his class." And I just couldn't believe it. This was like 1985, I believe. And I was just astounded that of all the places in LA that I could pick to call, Brandon was at that class, because I had no idea how to meet him. And so I showed up to the class, and he introduced us, and that was it. So it was an acting class in LA in 1985, approximately 85. Question 3: what was my initial impression of him? Brandon at that age was very, this is a hard one to ask or to even answer, in that I was attracted to him because of what he represented and not who he was, which was a big problem that Brandon had with people just wanting to meet him because he was Bruce Lee's son. And quite naturally, that would be bothersome for anybody, because no one really cared initially, as to what made you tick. It's like, oh, you're so-and-so's son. So he was rebellious. He had an attitude, but there was a light in his eyes. He was, I consider Brandon a genius. He was very, very intelligent, and he was one of the few men that found captivating to discuss things with. He was really out there, very well read, very educated, very opinionated, and was dynamic. He had charisma. He had personality. Number 4. What characteristics do you feel he and his father shared? Well, later on, the more I got to know him, I knew him a total of 8 years. You could see that he had Bruce's genetics in terms of his natural athletic skill. I remember the first night that Brad and I got together after the acting class. We picked up a 6-pack and went back to his place, sat around, had some drinks, and talked. And it went late into the morning, and we ended up working out. And a couple times we were just laughing about things. And it was real dark in the room. We just had a small light on, and at certain angles, it was Bruce there, and just the way he would, clench his fists or break into laughter. He had Bruce's exact laugh and everything. It was unique and it was eerie. It was quite an exciting time developing a relationship with Brandon. Question 5. How is Brandon as a fighter? I never fought Brandon. I never saw him fight. I do know that he had to defend himself very often as a child growing up. As soon as people found out who he was, they were on his case. How people can be. So it was my impression, discussing things with him, that he did street fight a lot in the self-defense sense, growing up, going through school. As a fighter, I would imagine he was like he was as a person. The mind navigates the body. I teach in my system, and you can look at someone and you can see very much what type of fighter they are just by discussing topics with them, the way they construct sentences. I can tell you, after talking to someone for 10 minutes, what type of fighter he is, just by the way he carries himself in a conversation. So I know that Brandon would be very, very intelligent, very sharp, a strategist, a tactician, and a formidable opponent, because how tenacious he was, because his ego was such that, like any great champion, you believe that you're superior. And to be a great actor, to be a great boxer, to be a great writer, you've got to believe that you've got something important to offer. When you two worked out, what skill in fighting did he have that impressed you most? Brendan had amazing awareness. When I first met him, he wasn't technically that proficient. He was training with Mike Vendrell in a kung fu system. He had done some stuff with Danny and Asano, but he wasn't at all, biomechanically polished or comfortable with what he was doing. He was more like we all go through, imitating moves and stuff. But Brandon had sharp awareness, like a cat. He moved like a cat is the best way to describe it. What were Brandon's feelings towards his father's art of Jeet Kune Do, and do you feel he had any plans of someday leaving the art? For the 8 years that I knew him, he had absolutely no plans. He later on stopped training with Mike Vendrell and started training much more extensively with Danny at their academy in Torrance. And he was just getting into I think, the training. He was also getting into just getting in shape. We used to talk extensively on the phone, and he just loved working out and really considered Jeet Kune Do what his dad did and not what he was doing, and trained, I think, at Danny's academy because it was just comfortable and natural, and he was treated ironically, it's almost paradoxical, as just another guy there who happened to be Bruce Lee's son. Whereas had Brandon gone to any other studio, he would have been treated obviously with extra attention or as a target. So I think there, a weird twist of fate, he was able to be unassuming and just work out and just do the training. I know that he was particularly into the grappling and the Thai boxing there, which, as you know, were not big parts of Bruce's Jeet Kune Do. Through interviews, Brandon always came. Next question. Through interviews, Brandon always downplayed being Bruce Lee's son. Can you give me some insight about his trouble coming to terms with his father's legacy? I remember in Hong Kong talking to Brandon about that very issue, and I just said, listen, your father was a legend, is a legend, and as soon as you come to terms with that and embrace that, you can use that to your benefit. It won't diminish who you are, but it will open doors for you and create rapport for you, and you'll be able to do what you want to do easier than someone else, and you should use that on that level. On possibly a more important level, I said to him, realize that your father has inspired and influenced so many millions of people to try harder, to believe in themselves, and that is a legacy to be very, very proud of. So, the trouble he had with that was earlier on, of being labeled Bruce Lee's son as opposed to Brandon Lee. And I mentioned that earlier in the article, that Brandon for many years was very rebellious, very James Dean-y, as it were, and it was because of that. I mean, it was very natural also. I think everybody would go through a similar phase where you just want your identity. You want to be known for you. But Brandon came into his own. He matured right into that. Next question. Initially, he refused the idea of becoming a martial arts movie star. Do you think he possibly felt his father's shoes were too enormous to fill? Who knows what was lurking in the back of his mind? Conscious plan was he wanted to be a serious actor. He loved acting. He studied it when he was in college in Boston, and wanted to be just a serious actor. Obviously, he had said to me a couple of times that he never wanted to do martial arts movies because he would always be compared to his father, and that's quite obvious. But those were the scripts that he got offered. People, the money people in the business saw that, marketing Bruce Lee's son, who was this, attractive, well-built athlete with considerable athletic skills, it would be easier to launch him in an action picture than in the remake of Lawrence of Arabia. So eventually, after I would imagine years of only getting scripts like that and not getting opportunities to show his acting talent, you make a business decision. And so that was where he started going into the action films. Next question. With his final movie, The Crow, being a huge departure from his previous films, did he finally feel his career was taking a turn in the right direction? I was down on the set 3 weeks prior to Brandon's accident, and he was very excited about this. There was a lot of action in the film, mind you, a lot of action, a lot of killing, a lot of, there was guns and blood all over the place, all through it. But it did have a story, and it required. It was like an action picture that was just so twisted. He was very challenged and very excited, and also the budget. You have to understand the movie industry a little bit more. And each film, his budget increased, which meant greater production and greater P&A, so that more of the public would see it. Things are starting to happen. Entertainment Tonight and Premiere Magazine, and all these people were onto this. So he thought after a couple more films like that, he would be able to do mainstream films, which is what he wanted. Next question. In some ways, Brandon seems to be a strange character. An example would be the story of him packing himself in ice to simulate death. Immediately comes to mind. Can you give me some insight into the more extreme side of his personality? No. There's some stuff that must remain private, and some stuff that I think his public would want to know. As far as packing himself in ice, you got two styles of acting. You've got the method actor who wants to replicate the reality and bring an emotional life that's representative of what the character is going through. And then you've got the Laurence Olivier type that just says, just do it, just pretend. That's what acting is. It's pretend. Brandon was more from a methody school where he thought it'd be really neat to pack himself in ice. Some of us would think it was crazy, and I'm sure Brando or James Dean, who were from a method school, would go, hey, that's a good choice to get into that mindset. Brandon was an adrenaline junkie, I'll tell you that. I mean, he loved, his bike and his cars and doing wild things and living on the edge. But the great Greek philosopher, Emperor Marcus Aurelius said, live each day as though it were your last. Next question. Please share some of your experiences with Brandon on the set of Legacy of Rage. The most exciting thing happened. There were so many experiences on the set, but I think the most interesting one was when we were doing a fight scene at the end, and we were choreographing the exact moves for the cameraman. And in this particular scene, I move in and get intercepted with a kind of a slashing back fist into a hook punch, and then an uppercut to the body, and then Brandon grabs my hair and knees me in the face. And I was wearing the costume shirt for the scene. But in the previous scene, I'd taken my shirt off to fight him, and then when we were re-choreographing what we had to do, they asked to have a chest protector or some sort of padding put on because they really wanted to get a close-up of Brandon nailing me. And so I looked over at the assistant director, and I said, I don't know who's doing continuity, but I've got my shirt off in the actual master shot of the scene. So they went, oh shit, because we had worked on this new fight. And to make a long story short, I said, listen, I train full contact martial arts. If I can't take a bare-fisted uppercut to the body and a couple of other shots to the body, by now, I shouldn't be in martial arts. So this is what we ended up doing is working at the scene, and Brandon really hitting me with that, good uppercut to the body, and then the knee to the head. All he had was a basketball pad on under his pants. And when you do a fast knee, even though you're pulling it to the head, we did about 8 takes. I had a migraine after that. It was pretty interesting just doing that choreography and having the actual contact. Next question: did you and Brandon plan to collaborate on more movies? I had a couple of meetings with him because, as you know, I've done a dozen pictures as a choreographer or technical consultant. And, quite naturally, Brandon being my friend, and as his star was rising, it was attractive to some of the people I was discussing with to have Brandon in the film. So I'd gone to LA a couple of times to discuss some projects that we were working on. I presented him with a script. He declined to do it. He thought that where he was going wasn't where that was going. It was business on that level. It was fun sitting there in Beverly Hills having sushi with my good buddy Brandon discussing my script. And there was no hard feelings at all like that. Although the last time I saw him when I was down on the set of The Crow, I was discussing some new projects, and he was very excited to hear that looked like I was going to get a break to star in a film, and was very enthusiastic for me. I asked him if the project was right, would he consider doing something, and he said absolutely, he's an actor, and what actors do is they act. He said, let's do something if we can. Next question. You mentioned he was not himself a few weeks before his death. Can you describe in detail what you meant by the statement and recall other events leading up to his death? Again, the private-public thing. When I met him down in Carolinas, he had a different pacing, a different space about him, and he was very vivacious and energized, but at times he didn't. It's not that he wasn't himself, because he was always himself, but and I don't know if it was the character. Who knows how all this happens. I mean, it's so. In retrospect, everything is so preordained and predestined. You look at stuff, and there's such an eerie coincidence to everything in life. And you go, well, if that hadn't happened, this would have happened. And if this hadn't happened, that wouldn't happen. And it's all rhetoric and irrelevant, because what happens happens. But I used to take I used to take a lot of pictures of Brandon when I was around him, and this time the pictures I took, he'd usually be joking or laughing, and then these are very somber looking pictures, and he had me read something out of a book from The Sheltering Sky, and there was a paragraph that he had highlighted that talked about the importance of life and living and remembering the little things in life, because you never know when you're going to die. And he was very, very captivated by that thought, and it was brilliant. It was brilliantly written, and we discussed it. And he, at the time, I never thought anything of it, because he was using it. He was using it for his character in his relationship with the female lead in the film, his girlfriend in the film. He used the essence of that thought from this book that he had read. Next question. Is it true that he was in fact obsessed with death? And if so, did he ever tell you about it? Again, I don't know that he was obsessed with death. He never told me he was obsessed with death. I think people like to say things. I think that was, I saw that walking through an airport on my way to some seminar in the States somewhere at the time, seeing Brandon, his picture plastered all over these things. I just couldn't believe some of the things that were being said. But I suppose that's what happens when you're a celebrity and something happens to you. Again, Brandon was an adrenaline junkie. He liked to live on the edge and liked to challenge people's comfort zones and his own. But that was the way he lived. And there's zillions of people that live like that. It's great for some and not okay for others. Next question. What type of relationship did he have with his mother, Linda, and sister Shannon? I never got too close to the family. Only you have to remember that I lived 3,000 miles away from Brandon, and our relationship, once or twice a year we'd see each other, and we talked sometimes every 3 months, sometimes every 2 weeks. There were stretches where for 6 months we wouldn't, be in contact. But we knew each other over a period of 8 years, and I did, when I go to California, and a couple times I was at with the families over around the Christmas holidays, and he seemed very, very close. I mean, we always spoke of them, and we loved his mother and his sister. As he got older, he was very proud of his heritage. I can say that. Not his heritage, but his legacy, and being part of that whole thing. I answered the next question in there. Am I friends with the Lee family, and do I still keep in touch with them? No, since the funeral, I haven't been in touch with anybody. It's kind of an awkward thing that you can't. My contact to them was Brandon, and it was so infrequent. I went to the funeral to pay my respects, and I'm in contact with a couple of the people that I met through Brandon, Um, and that's how I find out what's happening through the family. And in closing, how do you feel Brandon would like to be remembered? I think that Brandon, I think Brandon would just like to be remembered for being Brandon, for doing what he wanted to do, and doing what he wanted to do every single day. Whether it was work out, whether it was play tennis, whether it was drive around in a hearse or a Harley Davidson, just to live each day as though it was his last. And there's a strong message in there, and I think that we should all remember that his tenacity and his love and passion for the stuff that he did was what made him shine and made him the light that he was for so many people. And we can all mourn over the passing of him, or we can rejoice from what we've learned. And so I think Brandon, in closing, would just like to be remembered for being Brandon Lee and nobody else. I'd like to thank you, Paul. Hopefully, I'm very, because of some of the stuff that has happened with me, with Jeet Kune Do and all of that, I would have liked to have done more of an interview on that as well. Maybe we can do some stuff, fax me some more questions and maybe do a little bit of that. I don't want the interview to read Brandon Lee's comrade and friend, and I did a couple of edits in the introduction there because of obvious reasons, but maybe we could do some stuff, a few questions leading into me and the Jeet Kune Do connection, and I think the readers might be interested in that. If not, this is fine, and let me know. I'd like it obviously kept verbatim, and so contact me if you have a problem with any of my corrections. And I'd like you to maybe at the end give my address and phone number if anyone wants to contact me regarding videos. And just as a blurb after your introduction, maybe put like a little headline. Here's what some experts have to say about Tony, and include some of the testimonials from a brochure that I gave you, just to add that kind of credibility level to readers who don't know who I am. Take care, and I will speak to you soon. Thanks, bye.